When my son told me he was moving out, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I didn't know what else to do. He stood in the doorway with that same nervous look he used to have on his first day of school, except this time, he wasn't holding a backpack. He was holding a small suitcase. "I'll come visit often, Mom," he said. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, son. You have your own life now." He hugged me quickly, the kind of hug that ends before you realize it began. Then he stepped outside, and I heard the car door close. I stood there, hand resting on the wooden frame, listening to the sound of the engine fading down our narrow street. The house felt different right away. Empty. Too quiet. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, and the chair he always used at the dining table looked lonely, pulled out just a little, as if waiting for him to come back and finish his meal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing echoes of his laughter from the past, the way he used to call out, Mom, make some tea," or how he'd sit in the kitchen talking about school, life, dreams. I tried to remind myself that every mother goes through this. Every bird must let her chick fly. But no one tells you how silent the nest feels afterward. Weeks passed. He did call, sometimes. Always in a hurry. Always polite. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Don't worry, I'm fine." And I would answer the same way every time. "Yes, son, everything's fine." Then one afternoon, I decided to visit him. It had been months since he moved, and I thought maybe a surprise visit would make him happy. I cooked his favorite dish, chicken curry, and packed it carefully. I even ironed my best shawl. When I reached his apartment, I noticed 2 pairs of slippers outside the door. One was his. The other, I didn't recognize. I smiled, thinking maybe a friend had come over. But when I knocked, it wasn't my son who opened the door. A young woman stood there, smiling awkwardly. "Hi, here, can I help you?" she asked softly. I said, I'm Daniel's mom." Her smile faded slightly. "Oh, hello, Mom." She hesitated, glanced back inside, then said, Please come in." I stepped in slowly, my heart beating fast, not from excitement, but from confusion. The walls were decorated with new frames, pictures of the 2 of them. My son and this girl. Laughing. Smiling. Married. I froze when I saw the photo on the shelf, my son, in a formal suit, slipping a ring onto her finger. The date printed below read yesterday. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't part of his new life. I still remember the day he was born, a quiet winter morning, the kind where the fog rests softly on rooftops, and even the birds seem half asleep. Daniel came into my life like a warm light. I was young, nervous, and a little lost back then. My husband had a small mechanic shop, and we lived in a modest 2-room house on the edge of town. Life wasn't easy, but it was full. When I first held Daniel, I remember whispering, "You're my whole world now." And I meant it. Every beat of my heart belonged to him. As he grew, the house grew with him. His toys filled every corner, little cars, broken crowns, the tiny shoes I could never throw away. The walls still have faint pencil marks where I measured his height every few months. I never painted over them. I couldn't. Those lines are the story of his growing up, written right into our home. His father passed away when Daniel was only 12. That day, our house became quieter, smaller somehow. I remember sitting on the bed that night, holding Daniel close as he cried into my shawl. He didn't understand what it meant to lose a father, but I did. And I promised myself that day that I'd be both parents to him, his strength, his comfort, his whole family. We survived through difficult years. I started sewing clothes for neighbors and relatives. The old sewing machine my husband bought became my lifeline. At night, I would stay up late, stitching while Daniel did his homework beside me on the floor. Sometimes he'd fall asleep with his head on my lap, and I'd keep sewing, humming softly so he wouldn't wake. He was a good boy. Kind, humble, always ready to help. When he got older, he started working part-time to support me. "Mom," he used to say, "one day, you won't have to sew anymore. I'll take care of everything." And he did. He studied hard, got a decent job in the city. I was so proud, not just because he was successful, but because he never forgot where he came from. Every weekend, he would come home with groceries, sometimes a small gift, a new shawl, a jar of sweets, or just a bunch of fresh flowers from the roadside. He would sit with me over tea and talk about his week. Those evenings were the happiest part of my life. But slowly, things started to change. His visits became shorter. Sometimes he'd cancel last minute. He'd call to say, Mom, I'll come next week." Even next week would turn into next month. I told myself he was just busy, that city life was demanding. Still, a small voice inside me whispered that something was shifting, something I didn't understand. It was around that time he started mentioning a girl from work, Emily. "She's nice, Mom," he said once, smiling shyly. "She's very intelligent, always helping everyone." I smiled back, pretending not to notice how his eyes lit up when he said her name. I wanted to meet her, of course. Every mother wants to see the person who makes her child smile like that. But he never brought her home. "Some other time," he'd say. "She's busy." Months passed, and the name Emily came up less often. Then one day, not at all. I thought maybe they'd gone their separate ways. I didn't ask. I never wanted to push him. But after that, something changed in how he spoke to me. His tone was softer, yet distant. He started avoiding certain topics. Sometimes, when I'd ask simple things like "Son, are you eating properly?" he'd reply, "Mom, please don't worry so much." It sounded gentle, but it built a wall between us. Then, one evening, he came home after nearly 3 months. He looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes, something I couldn't read. We sat together, had tea, and I tried to ask about his life. He smiled politely, told me about work, but I could feel his mind was elsewhere. Before leaving, he said, "Mom, I might not come for a few weeks. There's a project at work." I nodded, like always, trusting his words. I didn't know then that in a few weeks it would turn into forever. After he moved out, the house lost its rhythm. I still cooked for 2, out of habit. I would lay out an extra plate, then quietly put it back. Every sound, the creak of the door, the rustle of the curtains, reminded me of him. Neighbors often said, "Your son must be so busy now. You should visit him sometime." And I would just smile, pretending it was my choice not to go. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared to see what his world looked like without me in it. I remember one morning, I found his old sweater hanging behind the door. It still smelled faintly of his cologne. I sat down and held it close, and for a moment, I felt like he was still that little boy who needed me. The tears came quietly. Not the kind that scream, but the kind that sink deep inside. Still, I waited. Every day, I waited for his call, his visit, his "Mom, I'm home." And every evening, when the sun set and he didn't come, I told myself maybe tomorrow. Until that one afternoon, when I finally decided to go see him. It wasn't planned. It just happened. I woke up, cooked his favorite meal, and packed it. My heart was beating fast, but it wasn't fear this time, it was hope. I thought he'd open the door, smile wide, and say, Mom, what a surprise." Instead, a stranger did. And that stranger called me Im. When that young woman opened the door, I remember the faint smell of jasmine coming from inside. It was the same scent I used to wear when Daniel was a child. He once told me he loved it because it reminded him of home. That memory hit me like a whisper from the past, soft but painful. "Please come in, Immerse," she said again, stepping aside. Her voice was gentle, careful, as though she wasn't sure what to say. I walked in slowly. The apartment was tidy, modern, not very big, but warm. There was a rug on the floor, a few plants near the window, and pictures on the wall. I turned toward the shelf and saw them, photographs of my son and her. In every photo, he looked happy. Radiant. The kind of smile that used to belong to me. She must have noticed me staring, because she said quietly, "We got married yesterday." The words echoed in my mind like the toll of a bell. Married. Yesterday. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I wanted to ask when, how, why didn't you tell me? But the words were trapped behind my heart. I felt the warmth drain from my hands as I clutched the dish I had brought, his favorite chicken curry, still warm inside the stainless steel container. "Oh, I finally said. Congratulations." She looked surprised. Maybe she expected tears, or anger, or questions. But I just smiled faintly. It wasn't that I didn't feel anything, it was that I felt too much. So much that it turned into silence. "Daniel will be back soon," as she said softly. "He went to get some things from the grocery store." I nodded and sat down carefully on the sofa. My hands trembled, so I held them together in my lap. The ticking of the wall clock filled the quiet room. Each tick felt like a heartbeat. When Daniel came in, his face changed the moment he saw me. He froze by the door, holding a small shopping bag. "Mom." I smiled at him. "Congratulations, sweetie." He put the bag down slowly. "Mom, I was going to tell you." I raised my hand gently. "It's all right. You didn't have to explain. You're grown up now. You made your choice." But even as I said those words, I could feel something inside me breaking, a soft, invisible crack that would never quite heal. He sat beside me, guilt written all over his face. "Mom, we didn't plan it like this. It happened suddenly. We just..." I interrupted, still smiling, still pretending I wasn't hurt. "You did what made you happy. That's what matters." There was a long silence. His wife, Emily, I assumed, went into the kitchen to give us space. That's when the truth began to sink in. It wasn't just that he got married without telling me. It was that he built a whole new life, and I wasn't part of it. There were pictures, decorations, memories, all formed without my presence. Without even my blessing. I stayed for tea. Emily brought out cups and some cookies, and I thanked her politely. She was kind, respectful. I could tell she was nervous. I didn't blame her. She must have known I was hurt, even though I tried to hide it. Daniel kept asking if I was comfortable, if I wanted more tea. His voice was tender but distant, like someone being kind to a guest, not to his mother. When I got up to leave, Emily offered to pack some pastries for me. I declined. My heart was already too full to carry anything else. "Mom," Daniel said, walking me to the door, "please don't feel bad. We wanted to tell you in person. I just didn't want to upset you before the wedding." I smiled weakly. "You didn't upset me, sweetie. I'm happy for you." He looked down, guilt shadowing his eyes. "I'll come visit soon." "Don't worry," I said quietly. "You have your own home now." When I stepped outside, the evening air felt colder than usual. The sky was turning orange, the kind of sunset that paints everything in bittersweet gold. I walked to the bus stop slowly, each step heavier than the last. I clutched my shawl tightly, trying not to cry in public. The bus ride home felt endless. The seat beside me was empty, but I could almost see a younger version of him sitting there, swinging his legs, talking endlessly about school, holding my hand. I turned my face toward the window so no one would see my tears. That night, the house greeted me with its usual silence. I placed the untouched chicken curry on the kitchen counter. The smell filled the room, familiar, comforting, yet unbearable. I sat at the table and looked at the second plate I had laid out for him, like I always did. This time, I didn't put it away. I just stared at it, my heart aching in quiet disbelief. I thought about all the times I imagined his wedding, how I dreamed of decorating our little home with string lights, inviting the neighbors, making rice pudding in big pots, dancing with joy as he tied the knot. I thought of the dress I had secretly kept aside for the occasion, an old pink silk dress I had never worn. And now, the day had come and gone. Without me. I whispered to myself, "You did well, my son. You found happiness." But the words didn't bring peace. They just echoed through the room, unanswered. The next few weeks were quiet. Daniel called once, maybe twice. The calls were short, polite, almost like checking off a duty. "Mom, how are you?" "I'm fine, sweetie. And you?" "All good. Emily says hi." And that was it. No long talks, no laughter, no stories. I started sewing again to fill the silence. The machine's rhythmic sound became my company. Sometimes I would pause, imagining he might knock on the door, saying, Mom, I missed your tea." But the knock never came. Neighbors came by and asked, How was the wedding? You must be so proud." I forced a smile. It was lovely. Then I'd quickly change the topic, before they could ask for photos. It's strange how you can love someone so much that even their absence becomes part of your daily routine. You start saving little moments of memory, the way they said your name, the sound of their laughter, the touch of their hand on your shoulder. Those small things become your comfort and your pain. One afternoon, I decided to send him some homemade pickles, his favorite. I carefully packed the jars, tied them with a cloth, and wrote a small note. Made with love. Don't forget to share with Emily. He sent a message 2 days later. Thanks, Mom. Emily loved them. That was all. Noe, I miss you. Noah, when will you visit? Just a polite thank you. I tried to be grateful for even that. But deep down, I missed hearing his voice, his stories, his laughter. I missed being needed. One evening, I sat outside on the porch, watching the sunset fade. The neighbors' children were playing on the street, their laughter echoing through the alley. I smiled watching them, but inside I felt the emptiness again, that space where my son's voice used to live. That's when it hit me. I hadn't lost him overnight. It didn't happen the day he got married. It had been happening slowly, quietly, for years. I just didn't notice. Every missed call, every delayed visit, every "Mom, I'm busy," each was a tiny step away from me. And now, we had reached a distance too wide to cross in one visit, too deep to fill with a few polite words. Still, I couldn't let go. Because that's what mothers do, we hold on, even when the world tells us to move on. I started praying more, not asking for anything, just talking to God about my son. Keep him safe, I would whisper. Keep him happy, even if he forgets me. Sometimes, I'd take out his childhood things, his old school badge, his toy car, the sweater I knitted for him. I'd place them neatly on the bed and sit beside them, as if talking to him through time. One night, as I was putting the things away, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Mom, can you come to the city next week? We're having a small dinner at home." My heart skipped a beat. Of course, sweetie. When the day came, I wore my best shawl and took the train to the city. I carried some pastries and a small gift for Emily, bracelets wrapped in a handkerchief. When I arrived, the apartment looked brighter, fuller. There were guests, laughter, music. It wasn't a big gathering, just close friends and a few of Emily's relatives. Daniel introduced me as my mom, smiling politely. Emily's mother came and hugged me. "You must be so proud of them," she said. I smiled, nodding. "Yes, I am." But as the night went on, I realized I didn't belong there. The conversations were light, full of jokes and plans. No one really spoke to me except out of courtesy. Daniel was busy serving guests, laughing, chatting. Every time our eyes met, he smiled quickly, that same polite smile, and moved on. I sat quietly in the corner, holding my cup of tea, pretending I was fine. And that's when the truth whispered again. He had built his new life, and I was a visitor in it. After that evening, the house started to feel heavier than before. Not because of the walls or the furniture, but because of the memories that lived in them. Every corner whispered something. Every small sound reminded me of a time when Daniel's laughter filled this space. I would wake up early, make tea, and sit by the window where I used to wait for him to come home from school. Now, I just watched the empty street. It's strange how habits remain even when the reasons for them are gone. Some mornings, I'd open the cupboard and see the blue cup he always used. I never had the heart to use it myself. It just stayed there, untouched, waiting for someone who no longer needed it. One afternoon, I decided to visit the market. It had been a while since I'd gone out. The same old shopkeepers were there, faces that had aged just like mine. "Long time," one of them said. "Haven't seen your son around lately." I smiled faintly. "He's busy," I replied. It was the only answer I had, and the easiest one to give. That evening, when I came home, the quiet greeted me again. I placed the groceries on the table, sat down, and looked around. It was clean, organized, lifeless. For the first time, I realized I hadn't heard my own laughter in weeks. Later that night, I found myself opening the old family album. Page after page, it showed a story that felt so far away: birthdays, school plays, messy kitchens, happy faces. And then one photo caught my eye: Daniel, maybe 5 years old, standing beside me with cake on his face. I touched the picture gently, tracing his small smile with my finger. "You were my whole world," I whispered. "And I never thought the world could move on without me." Tears came quietly, Not the loud kind, just the soft ones that fall when your heart finally admits it's tired. That night, before sleeping, I whispered a small prayer. Not for him to come back, but for him to be happy, truly happy. Because maybe love, the kind that never fades, isn't. The next morning, sunlight slipped quietly through the curtains, touching the floor in thin golden lines. I stood there for a while, watching how the dust floated in that light, tiny, weightless things dancing freely in the air. And I wondered when I had last felt that free. I made tea and sat by the window again, the same place where I'd sat for years, waiting, thinking, remembering. Only this time, I didn't wait for a call. I just sat there, feeling the warmth of the cup in my hands, listening to the faint hum of the world outside. It was in that quiet moment I realized something simple. I had built my entire life around my son's presence. Every routine, every meal, every smile had somehow circled back to him. And now that he had his own life, mine felt like a room with all its furniture removed, still standing, but empty. That thought didn't make me angry. It just made me aware. Maybe this was the part of life no one warns you about, the slow fading of purpose, the silence after decades of noise. That day, I took out a small notebook from the drawer and began to write. Nothing grand, just a few lines. Today, I made tea for myself. The house was quiet, but the sun was kind. I didn't cry. I closed the notebook and smiled. It was small, but it was something. Maybe healing doesn't begin with a big decision. Maybe it begins with a sentence. Later that week, I decided to clean the storage room. It had been years since I'd opened those old boxes. Dust sat on everything like a layer of forgotten time. Inside one box, I found Daniel's old school uniform, still neatly folded, a little faded, but smelling faintly of the soap I used back then. I held it close to my chest and laughed softly through tears. I remembered the mornings when he'd complain about waking up, how I'd iron his shirt while he sat on the edge of the bed tying his shoes. "Mom, I'll be late," he'd say, even though he never was. Those small memories came rushing back, warm and sharp all at once. After putting the uniform away, I found a small wooden frame at the bottom of the box. It was a photo from the day we moved into this house. Daniel was barely 10. He stood in the front yard, holding a small shovel, pretending to help with the garden. Back then, this house wasn't just bricks and walls. It was our dream, our beginning. Now, it was my reminder. I dusted the frame, placed it on the shelf, and whispered, "We built this together, didn't we?" That night, I called Daniel. Not because I wanted to complain or remind him of anything. I just wanted to hear his voice. When he answered, his tone was surprised. "Mom? Everything okay?" I smiled softly. "Everything's fine, dear. I was just thinking of you." There was a pause. "Oh, that's nice. We've been busy, but I was meaning to call." "I know," I said. "Don't worry about me. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you." He was quiet for a moment before replying, "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." It was a short conversation, barely 2 minutes, but when it ended, I felt lighter. I realized I didn't need long talks or grand gestures anymore. Sometimes, love survives in small sentences. After that call, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I decided to go for a walk, something I hadn't done in years. The neighborhood had changed. There were new houses, new faces, children playing where Daniel once did. As I walked past the park, I saw a little boy running toward his mother, holding a bunch of wildflowers. She bent down, smiled, and tucked one behind her ear. I stopped for a moment, watching them. A strange warmth filled my chest, not jealousy, not sorrow, just a soft, understanding ache. Every mother gets that moment once, when her child runs into her arms, when she is the whole world. And then time takes that moment and turns it into a memory. But maybe that's how it's meant to be. When I came home, I placed a small flower from the roadside in a glass jar by the window. It wasn't special, just something alive, something new. That evening, I made myself dinner and ate while the radio played softly in the background. It was strange. The same house that once felt too silent now began to sound peaceful. Weeks passed. Daniel called sometimes, sent photos, even a short video of him and his wife decorating their new apartment. He looked happy, genuinely happy, and though it stung a little, I smiled every time I saw him like that. One day, a letter arrived. It was from Daniel. Not a message, not a text, a real letter, written in his handwriting. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Mom, I don't say this enough, but I think about you all the time. Sometimes when I cook, I try to make your soup, but it never tastes the same. I know I haven't visited as much as I should, and I'm sorry. Life has been moving fast, but I want you to know, you're still home for me. Love. Daniel. I read it again and again, each line softening something inside me. It wasn't an apology I had asked for, but it was one my heart needed. That night, I placed the letter beside my bed. I didn't cry. I just smiled, a small, tired smile that came from relief. For years, I'd been afraid that distance meant disappearance. But now I knew, love doesn't vanish. It just changes its shape. A few days later, he called again. Mom, we're planning to visit next month, he said. I want you to meet her parents properly this time. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my voice calm. That sounds lovely. Will you make your apple pie? He asked, almost shyly. I laughed, a real laugh this time. Of course. I never stopped making it. After the call, I stood in the kitchen and looked around. The same walls, the same utensils, the same window with the same view, but everything felt different now. Alive again. It wasn't because Daniel was coming. It was because I had finally made peace with the part of me that missed him. Love had stopped being a wound. It had become a quiet strength. In the days leading up to his visit, I cleaned the house, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because it felt good to take care of my space again. I changed the curtains, polished the old table, and placed fresh flowers on the shelf next to his photo. And one evening, as I sat with a cup of tea watching the sunset, I realized something. I had spent so much of my life being a Daniel's mother, that I had forgotten to simply be me. That realization didn't make me sad. It made me curious. Maybe it wasn't too late to rediscover who I was outside of motherhood. Maybe, after all these years, I could still begin again. That night, I opened the same notebook and wrote. Today, I laughed again. The house still feels empty sometimes, but not lonely. I think I'm learning how to live, not just remember. I closed it gently, smiled, and whispered. Good night, my boy. The wind moved softly through the curtains, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace, not because everything had gone back to how it used to be, but because I had learned to love the way things had become. The day they were supposed to arrive, the morning felt different. It was brighter somehow, and even the air carried a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. I woke up early, as I always did, but this time there was no heaviness in my chest. only a quiet excitement, like the feeling you get before rain. I went into the kitchen and began preparing the apple pie. The same one he loved since childhood. As I mixed the ingredients, I caught myself smiling at small memories, how he used to sneak pieces of apple from the bowl when he was little, and how he'd grin when I pretended not to notice. Those tiny pieces of the past felt close again, like they had never really gone anywhere. By noon, the house smelled of cinnamon and baked apples. I opened the windows to let the light in. The curtains swayed gently, and for the first time in years, I caught my reflection in the glass, not sad, not waiting, just peaceful. Around 3 o'clock, I heard the sound of a car outside. My heart skipped a beat. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked slowly to the door. When I opened it, there he was. Daniel stood there, taller, older, but still my boy. His wife, Emily, beside him, smiling softly. For a moment, none of us spoke. It was as if time had paused just enough for my heart to remember how to beat again. "Hi, Mom," he said finally, his voice gentle. I smiled. "You're home." He stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't a long hug, but it was full of everything we hadn't said for years. I closed my eyes and let the warmth of it sink into my bones. I didn't cry. I didn't have to. The silence said enough. Inside, Emily walked around politely, complimenting the house. "It's so cozy," she said. "You have such warmth here." I smiled. It's an old house. It's seen everything: laughter, arguments, growing up. We sat down together, and I served them tea and pie. Daniel took a bite, looked at me, and said with a grin, "It tastes exactly the same." I laughed quietly. Some things don't change. For a while, we just talked, about small things mostly. Work, neighbors, plans for their new apartment. Nothing too deep. But it didn't matter. The sound of voices in this house again felt like sunlight after a long winter. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself just watching him. The way he moved, how his eyes softened when he spoke. There were traces of the boy he used to be, hidden beneath the man he'd become. And I realized I wasn't missing him anymore. He was right here, and even if this visit was short, it was enough. After dinner, we sat on the porch as the evening sky turned orange and pink. Emily had gone inside to take a call, and it was just the two of us, mother and son. Daniel looked out at the trees and said quietly, "I've missed this place." I smiled, looking at the horizon. "It missed you too." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mom, I'm sorry. For not visiting more often, for letting things get so quiet between us." I didn't say anything right away. I just reached out and held his hand. "There's nothing to be sorry for," I said. "You were living your life. That's what I raised you to do." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw that familiar softness in his eyes again. "Still," he whispered, "I should have called more." I squeezed his hand gently. "You just did. That's all that matters." We sat there quietly, listening to the evening sounds, the crickets, the wind brushing the leaves. It felt like all the distance between us had finally dissolved into that quiet. Later that night, after they had gone to bed, I walked around the house, turning off the lights one by one. When I reached his old room, I paused at the doorway. It looked different, cleaner, emptier, but I could still see him there, years ago, with his scattered books and that messy smile. I stepped inside, ran my hand across the windowsill, and whispered, "Thank you for coming home." Then I looked up at the sky through the small window. The stars were faint but visible. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone under them. The next morning, they were leaving. As Daniel loaded the car, Emily hugged me tightly. "We'll come again soon," she said. I smiled. "You better. I'll keep the pie recipe waiting." Daniel hugged me one last time. "Take care of yourself, Mom." "I always do," I replied softly. As the car drove away, I stood at the gate, waving until I couldn't see them anymore. Then I turned back toward the house. The garden looked brighter. The wind carried the faintest scent of apple and cinnamon. And even though the house would soon fall quiet again, it didn't feel like emptiness this time. It felt like peace. That evening, I opened my notebook again and wrote the final entry on the last page. "He came home today." The house laughed again. I didn't need to hold on anymore. Love never left, it just changed its place. I closed the notebook and placed it beside his old photograph. Then I sat by the window, tea in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of goodbye and grace. There was no pain this time. No longing. Only gratitude. And maybe that's how love should end, not with tears, but with quiet thankfulness. For all the years it stayed.